start straight away with you, Lekha. I mean, you've built up an enormous and a very important collection of textiles. I want to know what sparked your interest in collecting textiles, and possibly could you talk about some of the highlights in your collection?
Thank you, Meera. Thank you, Charlene. Thank you, everybody here in the audience. My name is Renuka Poddar. I'm the co-founder of Devi Art Foundation. Foundation which is primarily had collected contemporary art from South Asia. But we also have a collection of living traditions of India and now textiles. So as you asked me, how did the interest in textiles got sparked? In the 1990s, 1980s actually, festivals of India were started by the government of India, and these festivals started to be taken to different countries in the world. The first one was in the UK, and the second in America, I think France, and then America, Japan, and they went all over the world. So traditionally, initially, all of us were just used to seeing traditional textiles as they were. And if you see on the left is a traditional patron patola. But in the festivals of India, a lot of new designs were given to very traditional textiles. And on the right, you see a patron patola made in the 1990s. One of the Festival of India exhibition came to Delhi, and the weavers were allowed to sell their products which had been designed for the Festival of India right there and then. So it was a great privilege that we had, that we could acquire some of the textiles that were actually made for the Festivals of India, and that's where the spark started, I think. Next. Over the years, then people have suggested that get this and get that, and I think at a certain point a collection was all over the place, but still different things were being bought. This was a textile which is kalamkari print, and so I also wanted to say the influence of Indian textiles that were taken abroad. So these are textiles which were sort of made in India for a market that was outside of India. This is kalamkari, which was made for the Sulawesi market, which is Indonesia, and I think it was possibly made for an important occasion because it was not meant to be kept vertically, it was meant to be hung horizontally, and there are some elephant prints on the corner here. Next. This is Kashmir woven for the Iranian market, and the motifs here are much larger than we would see in a Kani shawl. Next. This is an embroidery which was done with beetle wings. Beetle wings has been used in miniature paintings for ever so long, from I think the 11th, 12th century onwards, but I think getting into embroidery was much later. It's an influence that was, I think, because the British, when they were here, they wanted to have these, I think, slightly exotic embroideries, and they would get the embroideries made and take them down back to England and then have them stitched on their gowns. I think this is really not the right, but you can see beetle wings on the gowns. This is supposed to be the version, and they got gowns made like this. And I'm sure there are lots in the DNA collection. Maybe Uthra can mention something next. This was a textile that was made again for the Festivals of India. So as I was mentioning, some of these things were made in India, but they were being shown abroad, or they were being sold abroad. So this was not sold abroad, but this was absolutely extraordinary. It's a textile which has got 108 birds printed, influenced by Salim Ali, who was a great bird authority. I don't know how many blocks there are, but it's about 14 foot long, wide. I think it's about 23 feet long and about 14 foot high, this textile. I just wanted to show for the sheer scale of, what these textiles really were at. This doesn't belong to me, but I just wanted to show this because it's just such an extraordinary textile. Next. Again, this is the reverse. These were textiles that were made abroad for the Indian market. So from what I understand, that a lot of us really always did believe that this was made in Belgium, but I think in an exhibition I did see that these were being made in Manchester for the Indian market. Because the Taki collection showed this place which I in one of the exhibitions at the National Museum, and they had managed to get jacquard cards from one of the mills in Manchester. So possibly it was made in Manchester for the Indian market. Next. This has just been shown in 2018 in exhibition that we did at the National Museum called Prakashi. These now textiles are being made in India, but the imagery is a triptych which is being made in brocade, and the imagery is from Michelangelo. Next. We did an exhibition then called Fracture in 2015, and it was a 3-year process by which we had made an open call, invited people to work with textiles. Not everybody who participated was a textile practitioner. This one was Chandrasekhar Bhera, and this is the brief for the exhibition was that they could use traditional techniques, but they had to make something contemporary. And fashion was not something that was encouraged that anybody could make garments or something. Chandrasekhar Bhera, who has been a textile practitioner, made this cotton tapestry, which is really buddies that we have on our floors. But he made this as an installation. Next. Swati Kalsi, who's also showing at the India Art Fair in the booth of Delhi Crafts Council. This was a kind of Susni, which was made the technique from Bihar. Next. And I just wanted to end with the 2 exhibitions that we've just done at the Crafts Museum. First one on the left is fine count cotton, and this is a Jamdani which was made in Banaras in just about 20-25 years ago. And on the right we have a Petri, possibly 19th or 20th century. It's an exhibition of silk on. Hopefully all of you will get a chance to see it. Thank you.
Yeah, Lekha, I think I've got to see at least 3 of these exhibitions, so definitely Fracture, 4 actually. Fracture at the National Museum, and then the last 2 shows at the Crafts Museum. I'm going to stay with you and ask you, some follow-on questions. What do you see or foresee as some of the challenges that are facing the field of textile arts today?
I think the challenges are that obviously the market sort of demands that things are made cheeky, saris and whatever other textiles, and I think a lot of polyester has come in. But I also do feel that along with the challenges there is a lot of hope. Because when we did Fracture, and we were looking for textile practitioners, I think part in 1 or 2, there were mostly people who joined in from other practices. There were graphic artists or fashion designers, the same. Very few from the textile practice, per se. I think today, that was 2015, we are only in 2023. In these 7 to 8 years, you will find textile practitioners now from north, south, to east to west, which is great hope. Yes, of course, the challenge is that, the market is constantly wanting things which are cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. And the traditional textiles which are being made, even till about 20, 30 years ago with proper silk or with cotton, are now being converted into rayon and polyester and power looms instead of hand looms. So that is a huge challenge. But I also have thought that people who are discerning will still wish to have the proper textile. So if it is chanderi, people will try and get a proper cotton by cotton chanderi, which possibly is not available today, but maybe at least it can be cotton by silk. That market is very small, and I presume the weavers who also weave are also very few in numbers. I just hope that the market sustains even those few weavers, so that tradition continues. The market can continue to have their power loom sarees and their, polyester sarees. But the traditional ones which are still available, I hope they continue. I think it's a huge challenge, but I think it is still there, and I'm hopeful that it continues.
And my final question to you is, does India need to inscribe its own contemporary narrative within textiles? And if yes, how do you see that? What should that be?
Well, contemporary narrative is happening. I think a lot of, as I told you, that when we worked in 2015, there were no textile practitioners per se. There would be 2 or 3 or 4 you could count on your fingers. Today, there are about 50 practitioners who are working in different parts of India, and they are bringing a contemporary component to what they are doing. Even Renuka, who is a practitioner sitting here, she's trying to revive the traditional technique of kalamkari, but then her design is also coming forward and becoming slightly contemporary. I mean, maybe the form, the actual motif might not change, but the form might change for the textile. In that way, a lot of people, whether it is from Banaras, or whether it is from Assam, or whether it's from South, people are experimenting with newer designs. And I guess that is about the only contemporary vocabulary you can expect. Fashion also is a big driver of all of this. And we are, at the end of it, I think the only country in the world left with these handcraft traditions and hand-weaving traditions. And I just hope that it remains alive, and if it gets contemporized, I think it's very good.
Thanks for that, and I think you mentioned Lekha, and Lekha will come straight onto you. You've been working a lot with chins, and I was just very keen to understand exactly like with Lekha, what is it that sparked your interest in chins of all things?
Thanks, Meera. I think I first encountered chins in 2010, and I guess anyone who's seen the historic chins would probably have the same reaction. You respond to the scale, the colors, the very exotic flora and fauna, and I pretty much had the same reaction that, wow, I want to make these. So I started studying chins and getting, deep diving into it, and next slide. And I started comparing them to the features of historic chins to the current chins or kalamkari as you know it. And I started seeing differences not in terms of forms or motifs, but in terms of visual quality. I really struggled in the beginning to understand what was it that was different from next slide. And again, this could be just a personal reaction. I found the historic pieces to be very rich. And I could give all kinds of adjectives, but I still couldn't really figure out what was it that was making that difference between historic gems and Kalamkari. Next slide. So I kind of identified 3 different visual differences, and one of them is the resist technique, and to those who are not aware of what a resist technique is, the white lines on the red flower are accomplished by painting wax on the cloth and then painting a mordant or dyeing the cloth. So the resist acts as a barrier and protects. Now can you imagine the red flower without the white lines? Because I think the resist technique gives an extra dimension, an element to the work, and similarly, can you imagine the blue flower without the white details, or the flower without the white details? The wax resist technique is no longer practiced, and to me, it was a very crucial part of historic art. So this is one of the techniques I realized was making that big visual difference for me. Next slide. The next big difference that I noticed and that mattered to me was the color palette. Historically, there were only 4 dyes that we used. There was fermented iron for black, indigo for blue, madder for red, and pomegranate for yellow, maybe turmeric. But the color palette that you see in historic pieces is so wide and large, and just from the combination of 4 dyes in itself is remarkable. But perhaps what is even more remarkable is the fact that they had survived 300 years, 400 years, and they're incredibly bright. And I'm talking about natural dyes, and today we usually like to believe that natural dyes are not fast. I beg to differ. But the question is, why did they last so long? How did they die? What was the practice that made them last so long? It's something that I was very curious about. Next slide. So the early slides that you have seen were Indian textiles that were traded to the West, and before you see these florals and But these 2 are the textiles that were traded to the East, and you can see what a different language it is. And I think what is remarkable that India was historically trading textiles to all over the world, but using the same technique. And I think they were able to customize all these designs to local markets was because the mastery of the technique was so amazing. And I think when that penny dropped, that it's really the techniques that are allowing this kind of versatility in design. I started studying the technique in detail, taking up historic texts about documentation about how they were done. So when I started studying how it was made, that was a whole different thing for me, because I come from a background of handmade textiles and also technical textiles. I worked with automotive textiles. And when I started studying the process, then I couldn't believe how efficient, complex, amazingly multi-step process historic chins making is. And when people see chins, it's they see how beautiful it is. But one of the reasons I'd like to come here and talk is to tell the people that to give that information that it's actually even more beautiful than we think, if you knew how it was made. So yeah, I mean, the process is really where my obsession is at this point. So that's all about.
So Renuka, do you think it's possible now to produce 18th century quality chins today? And if yes, how can one do so?
Next slide. Well, I am optimistic. I've been doing this for 12 years now. I sometimes still feel like I've only scratched the surface, really. I am trying to decode 2,000 years of practice. But I am optimistic. There are some limitations. For example, the red dye that was historically used is no longer available. It's just not available anymore. The second really important, sadly, is the fabric quality that was produced 200-300 years ago. It's just not possible with the current skill set. And to me, that is a canvas. And without the right type of handspun and woven cotton is the base fabric that is used. I feel it makes a difference. So as Lekha mentioned, I do use traditional motifs but in a contemporary form, and this one I call a conversation between two peasants. One is in a very beautiful, luscious garden with other peasants, but imprisoned in beauty, and the outside one is alone but free, and I wonder what is the conversation that they're having. So I use the technique too as an expression. Next slide. This was commissioned for the Royal Ontario Museum for their recent exhibition called The Cloth That Changed the World. And this is more in line with the historic motifs and formats, but the size was really challenging for me to do. It's a 4x6 feet. Next slide.
And, Renuka, what are some of the challenges you faced while reviving earlier techniques?
So again, I guess my answer is tied to my earlier identification of techniques and a no longer practice. And the one that you saw earlier was the wax resist. It sounds so simple. Paint with wax, draw a line. I kid you not, it is not simple. How do you change the quality of the wax so that it is still molten as you're drawing lines that are finer than a pen? And I can't imagine what a historic craftsman, how much they must have experimented to come at such a kind of material that satisfied the properties that made you draw such fine details. So it involves a lot of, and this is where I rely and go back to my experience in technical textiles, is just material properties. How do you lower a melt temperature of wax, or how can you wash it off? You want it to stay, but you wanted to wash it off. So wax resist is in fact one of the first techniques that I really work with. And I will say that I'm somewhat successful, but I still have a long way to go to reach the expertise that the historic craftsmen have. The second one, and this is really one of my favorite ones, is in the process, the cloth is dyed in madder and it acquires this reddish tinge. And historically, the way it was removed was cloth was put in dung, whether it's sheep dung or goat dung. And then it's exposed to sunlight for a week, 10 days, sometimes 2 weeks, depending on the weather. And the dyed colors, or the colors where the mold is painted, they stay as bright as ever, but the background is bleached. And to me, it's really, really magical that who would have thought that dung could be used to bleach cloth? And we don't know where the practice originated. We do know that Europe also used it, but probably that knowledge came from India. To me, it's tunes is full of magic for me. Next slide. This is another more recent research for me, and this was a very, very tricky one, because historically where the areas that are blue are covered, the areas that are not blue are covered with wax. And I'm talking about giant pieces, right? I'm talking about like 10 feet by 10 feet sometimes. They're covered with wax, and the whole cloth dipped into small wax, and yet the wax did not crack. And again, it's such a testament to a historic craftsman's perception, understanding of materials. How did they do it? I honestly still don't know. I can do smaller pieces, which is the one on the right. It has been dipped dyed in indigo, and I've been fairly successful with not having cracks. But the size is still small. I think this one's about 2 by 3 feet. My goal is to do a much larger piece and be successful at not having cracks. So So these are the three ones that I've heavily worked on.
I can really feel your passion when you're talking about it. And I think, since we know has really had an incredible history, right? How do you see its future?
I think it offers a set of techniques that have not been really explored in the contemporary world. It offers a very deep dive into natural elements. I wake up and my first thing is, what's the weather like today? Can I do what I plan to do? It's an interaction on a very wholesome level. And I think in exploring this medium as expression in the contemporary world would be very interesting, not just in the way it was used historically, but how can we push what we know? I think it would be very exciting.
No, thank you so much for that. I'm going to turn to Uthra also, I think, in the interest of time. Uthra, can you, I'm going to just start with you and ask you about, your curatorial projects, and basically to talk through your practice by, talking about your projects.
Sure. Thank you so much to everyone who's here today and to India Art Fair for inviting me. So can I have the next slide, please? So I recently published an article with an online magazine called Corridor 8, and it's called Curating Home, and it gives an overview of the curatorial projects that I've been involved in. And I called it Curating Home because I feel that Textiles has this amazing magical ability to connect so many facets of our lives and histories and politics, and so it felt like the right fit. What you're seeing on screen is a still from a performance by Yasmin Jahan Nipur, who is based in Dhaka in Bangladesh. I've done a lot of work with Yasmin, and this performance piece was called A Tailor Sewing a Dress for Tipu Sultan, and it was part of the exhibition that I curated at the Whitworth called Beyond Borders, and it brought together 4 artists from South Asia who also critically examined the collections of textiles and South Asian textiles in Manchester. Next slide, please. So the most recent exhibition that I've curated is called Cotton, Labour, Land and Body, and it's on now at the Crafts Council in London. And that brought together 4 artists who were looking at the politics embedded within cotton. And so the artists are Raisa Kabir, Bharti Parma, Bridget McClear and Ritu Sattar, and they were initially commissioned by the British Textile Biennale in 2021, and the Crafts Council brought these artists together and invited me to curate this exhibition. So what you see in this exhibition is not just their artworks, but also the sensitivities around the histories and the legacies and the politics that still are carried through in the garments, and particularly cotton, that we have today. And I think it's such an ubiquitous fabric that nearly everybody owns something made of cotton. Next slide, please. So this is a short video clip that is going to just talk about the fast fashion industry that we live in. If you could just play that video, please.
We communicate who we are through clothing. It is fundamentally a part of what we wish to communicate about ourselves. We used to have a system, a fashion system. That has absolutely nothing to do with the fashion industry today. It has been reinvented.
It's based on materialism. The problem is that comes at a really high price.
Garment factory collapsed, killing more than 1,000. Clashes between clothes factory workers and black police in
Last November, 112 people were killed in another major factory fire. 30,000 factory workers
workers in Bangladesh are paying the price for cheap clothing.
Well, the promise of globalization was that it was going to be a win-win, that consumers in the rich world would get cheaper goods and people in the poorer parts of the world would get jobs, and that those jobs would give them an opportunity to work their way out of poverty.
This enormous, rapacious industry that is generating so much profit, why is it that it is unable to support millions of its workers properly?
The actual business model is completely unsustainable. Unless you change that model, you can't change anything.
When everything is concentrated on making profits, what you see is that human rights, the environment, workers' rights get lost.
My God, we can do better than this.
Thank you. Next slide, please. So I like to talk about all these different aspects of politics that come through very powerfully in textiles, because it covers ecologies, it covers land, histories, people, displacement, human rights. And so when I was awarded the New Collecting Award to make acquisitions for the Whitworth, I was looking at textile artworks made by women artists from South Asia and the diaspora that really challenged what our understanding was and is of textiles and textile art from this part of the world, but also to start a conversation between South Asia and the diaspora, but also not to shy away from the politics. So one of the artworks I collected was Yasmin Jahan Nepal's work called Unity of the Untitled. And the negative spaces that you see represent the colonial histories and the legacies of the East India Company. And she talks about how the impositions on the weaver and the imposition of the control of the muslin industry and I think everybody knows that story about how weavers' thumbs were cut off, and she talks about how that history still hurts her. So she created this incredible piece that we put on display, and then we acquired it through the New Collecting Award, and it's hand-woven muslin in Dhaka. Next slide, please. One of the other works was by Arshi Ishada Manzai, who has a very interesting practice using indigo and the technique of kalamkari, but includes a lot of script in her work, living between India and Afghanistan, and she's now a refugee in Germany. She talks about the social and cultural codes that women have to live their lives by, but also some of the personal histories and traumas that they've been through. So a lot of the motifs that you see repeated in her work speaks to those stories of the women that she feels very connected to through her work. Next slide, please. So one of the other aspects through the award was to not only look at textile art and what can sometimes be seen as quite traditional, but also to challenge the techniques associated with textiles. So this is a work using the technique of cross-stitch, but it's using human hair, and it's by the Pakistani artist Rahana Mangi, and this is on display right now at the Whitworth. Next slide, please. And this is a sculptural work by Madhi Acharya Baskerville, who lives in the UK, originally from Bengal, and she looks at the environmental pollution of plastic, but also uses found textiles, old textiles that she cuts up and builds into these fantastic sculptures. And she uses the site of the coastline as a place for thinking and as a place for connecting with other cultures around the world, and thinking about that shared sea, that shared water, that shared body that we all inhabit and are responsible for. Next slide, please. And then I'm currently working as a consultant with NLDC in Bhuj in Kutch, and this is an organisation that has a museum but is also incredibly skilled at providing experimental spaces for artisans to come up with contemporary textile artworks. And this is just one of the textile wall art pieces that will go on display in their next exhibition, 100 Objects. And it's been supported and really brought to life by Curating and Renuka Reddy, who have been working tirelessly for many, many years with the artisans at LLTC. Next slide, please. And I'd just like to finish with a short clip from one of the films in the Cotton exhibition. This is by the artist Bartley Palmer, and the film has been made by Seema Gonsai, and it's called Cotton, Colonialism and Resistance. It's not the full film, it's just a short clip due to the time we have. Could you play the film, please?
Born in a village, then brought up in the city, Surat. My father was a priest, and then in the part-time, he started his little business as a tailor. People come with a fabric length for the trousers and the top and things like that. And they come and they give their measurements, and father used to cut it and then make it into garment. So I learned some of the basic skill of garment making from him. So there's a textile route to start with. We used to have cotton fields. When the cotton ball is ripe, it's open, and it's all white cotton fibers with seeds inside, which you pick it up with hand. The whole thing takes about 14 months. After you pick it up, it is put into a big carding machine, which is called ginning, where they remove the seed and the fibers is separated. There is no spinning mills in India in those days. The bales coming in here, in Manchester, then bales were opened up in the mills, were made into the fabrics. And they process the fabric like moisturization and bit of a stentering and things like that, and make into the cloth. And then that cloth has been stamped, made in England, and then sent to India. How many times? 40 times dearer than what they have cost them to have a bale.
Thank you very much.
Uthra, that's been really fascinating, and I have a lot of questions for you, but I've just seen the time check. I think we're completely out of time. But before that, I mean, maybe I could just throw a couple of questions to the audience, and if nobody has anything, maybe I can ask you one question. But yeah, anybody from the audience We can take maybe one, max two. Can somebody get a mic? Yeah.
Hello, thank you very much for this panel. I am the Devi Art Foundation in Belgium, connected to this, this engagement between art visual and craft. And in Belgium, we have this kind of patrimony as well. So I have a question for Lekha. I heard that you have invited craftsmen during 3 months on vernacular tradition. To do specific project. Can you tell us more about this kind of residency with this indigenous community?
Sorry, I think you got that a little wrong. I haven't got residencies with the craftsmen. What we did was that we, in 1913 or 1912, we started a project which we just thought that we would use the traditional techniques that are available in India in textiles and try and make something contemporary. So it was an open call, and that I showed you a couple of textiles from that project. People were asked to make something which was a contemporary product, which pretty much became the artworks. Different practitioners came. They worked, some were part of the textile tradition, some not. But actually just there were two or three who knew basics of textile. The rest were from graphic art and fashion and other professions. But it took us about 3 years to get that exhibition together. And we had only about 15 or 18 pieces. Are you talking of vernacular or are you talking of textiles?
I think you're talking about the vernacular everything.
I'm sorry, that's a completely different exhibition. That was done over 2-3 years, practiced with 75 vernacular artists. There was an open call, 300 artists applied. It was to be their dream project. It was voted down to about 75 artists. And yes, those were traditional arts, also traditional, living traditions, whether you call them vernacular art, whichever way you want to portray them. And they were pushed to make something new. And we did 2 exhibitions over 6 months each exhibition, using crafts and arts from the villages and tribal areas, rural areas, things like that. So there are 2 separate exhibitions that we did.
One last question. Yeah, one last question. I think, Shali, how much time do we have, Shali? Okay, so this is the last question, unfortunately. Yeah, go ahead.
Where can for heritage villas have such fabric for girls and bedsheets and all that? Where can we get this in Gujarat for getting there these type of building fabrics?
I think that question is for you because you were talking about chintz.
Well, whoever. I want to know where can we get such fabrics for prints?
Which kind?
Cotton, those designs and all that.
Yeah, must be the chintz, Renuka.
There's Kalahasti for hand-painted textiles. There is machine for block prints. And there's of course wood for Ajrak wood for Ajrak prints. You could probably talk to me after the session.
Yeah, I think that would be best because in the interest of time, we need to wrap up. I want to thank our 3 speakers and panelists today. I've learned a lot through the session and I'm sure our audience has as well. Thank you everyone for attending. It was great to see so many people here and I hope you came away with a lot of learning from our 3 panelists. Thank you.